Walking in, my first client was a group of system engineers. There was 200 people. We were doing the Myers-Briggs type indicator, or one of those personality models. Maybe it was temperament. I brought puppets to actually illustrate each personality type. So you were either a dolphin or an owl. And I thought that was a good idea with 200 systems engineers. So
Engineers with puppets.
yes. And so here I am with my puppets and talking about personality types. And let's just say you didn't want to be me that day. It wasn't pretty. Much like you, not only were they prisoners, then there was this woman with puppets. This was away after about 30 seconds, realizing the nonverbals weren't good.
Welcome to Titans of Transition, featuring real-life stories, anecdotes, and inspiration about pivotal career moments from leaders who have been there. Join host Joe Miller, former scientist and senior technology leader turned executive coach, as he unpacks transitional moments to help inspire change.
Hey, Julia, welcome. I'm so glad that we're finally getting together on this podcast. I've been waiting for a while, but it's been exciting to think about reconnecting with you. And so for everyone stopping in and listening, I just want to let you know, Julia and I go back quite a ways. I'd say probably about 10 years. Does that sound about right?
At least, but we were
okay. When Julia was delivering leadership and management training and all kinds of great things at a company I was at in the Bay Area, Zoma, which you were a longtime contractor, consultant for human resources, delivering that training. And it just was a wonderful time. And the great thing about you, and I'll just start with some positive thoughts on you, because I don't know if anyone else can relate to this. And then for those who are in human resources, please know I love you. But often you get people coming in to deliver training, especially in a technical or engineering kind of scenario or company. A lot of the training doesn't seem to really connect very well. And so as a leader, as a manager, you tend to kind of dread it a little bit. So I can remember I get probably the first class with you when I walked in going, oh gosh, not another one of these. And it didn't take very long at all until I realized you were a different kind of person and you connected really quickly with all of us. So that's one of the things, affirmations for you as we start off. I just want to say both something I really loved about working with you and getting to know you was how you were able to just get everyone to open up and actually learn something. So that was wonderful. So welcome. I'm so glad you're here today.
Well, thanks. And it's nice for you to finally admit you were actually a prisoner in my training program after all these years.
Only in the beginning. Only in the very, very beginning. Yeah. So how did you get into the whole? Well, first of all, let's start with where you are today, and what are you doing? Tell us about your business.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Julia Mallory Consulting, and we do leadership and management training. We do it globally. So if you had told me then, when I first started, that we would have global reach and be doing learning and development and designing curriculum and delivering it for a variety of companies, I never would have, I would have said, really? And then we also launched a subsidiary called Flourish, which is a cohort of really exceptional executive coaches. And then we also offer coaches for everybody. So whether you're newly minted in your career, you can have a coach. And then we do the traditional executive coaching as well. But I really love the coach for everyone idea. So that's what I'm working on in addition to the learning and development.
So you had to do some shifts here recently because of this virus scourge we're going through.
Well, interestingly enough, so since we're talking about change and transition, I actually define transition as the psychological process that we go through in dealing with change. So change happens really fast. So, with the pandemic, literally I was in New York City teaching a class, and the next day sheltering in place in my home in California. So that change happened fast. The psychological process, the transition into this world of sheltering in place and how it impacts the business has been slow and necessary. And I think that's been the challenge for most people during this time. And it's shifted our business considerably, but it's also been a really exciting learning curve, if I can, derive any positivity from it. We're shifting, and our goal is still the same: to create learning opportunities to bring people together. And so kind of our underlying goal is still the same. We just have to do it in a different forum.
Yeah. So, but there's so much chemistry that happens in the room, right?
Yes. And that's been an interesting, I have always been a person that said, well, blended learning solutions are great, but there's magic that happens when human beings are together. And how do we bring that magic to an environment like the one we're in right now? And I think we're learning different, we're using tools that help us collaborate. I don't think the human moment will ever be replaced. I do think there will be a time where human beings, we're pack animals, we're going to be together again. So, for me, this is, an interim. It's forcing us to do things differently and adapt and, we need to bring the best of ourselves to the situation. And that said, the human moment is something I miss. And I think we'll have it again. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think everyone's looking forward to that. But I do think, as you said, we really have learned a lot through this process. We've, across the board, all different businesses, they've all been shifting. And it's been sort of an amazing thing to watch. Why don't we turn the clock back? And let me ask you, how did you get to the point when you arrived at that class that you taught at Zoma for us? How did you get into that line of work to begin with? Is that something you chose from the start?
No, I think it chose me. I think, growing up and through school, I wanted to be a teacher. I studied humanistic psychology. So I think human beings are endlessly fascinating. So I knew I would either be a therapist, but I thought, wow, I'm such an extroverted personality. How do I just work one-on-one with everybody all day? But I knew it would be something in the behavioral sciences. That said, I graduated from school in reality of, oh, my mom's not going to pay my rent. I actually have to buy my own toiletries. I had to pay my bills. So I ended up going into banking, into finance, because it was more stable, and stayed there 11 years. And at the time, I ended up in management very quickly. It's only looking at that, being in banking and finance for so long, it's only looking through the rearview mirror that I see I learned so much about managing people through that experience, that it was really the battleground for me to really learn those skills. What does it take to work with and through other people? So I thought it was a very fallow time. It was tough. I didn't like it. I'm allergic to structure. This is detail oriented and organized, and I don't have these skills to bring to bear, but turned out to be one of the most valuable experiences. And so, after that, I ended up getting married and having 3 children, 18, 19 months apart, 3 little girls. And when I kind of looked up from changing diapers, I realized I needed to go back to work. I was, my marriage was disintegrating, and thought, wow, I have to look at my CV, and I have two really strong qualities. I can navigate sibling negotiation. I was pretty good at that.
That's huge.
And I could cook. And I went, wow, how do I go back to the workforce? Like many women who leave the workforce for a period of time, how do you get back into the workforce?
And it's kind of hard to see yourself back in that environment, because that's such a big shift. And so it's, as you start to, whether it's a change that was thrust upon you in a certain sense, or the situation happened and you responded, there you were, and now you're trying to visualize yourself back in that work environment. I wonder what that was like.
Well, it was interesting because it was also when personal computing was just coming on the scene. So I left the workforce where we were like taking these huge discs, and loading them into what looked like a washing machine, and then coming back into the workforce where there was this computer on your desk. And so things had changed a lot. And I really didn't know what I could do. So I thought, well, I can cook. I'll take some cooking classes. And I ended up meeting the CEO of this cooking school and kitchen store. And he said, you have management experience. Do you want to be our director of training? And I said, well, I have 3 little kids and I need flexibility. And those days work from home was not a thing. I mean, we didn't work from home. And he said, listen, he was way before his time. He said, listen, you can bring the kids with you to work. You can work whatever hours you like, as long as you're here to get the work done when you can do it. And the 4 years I spent there were just amazing. Because I got to sit, I was sitting on the executive team. We were a hyper growth company. We were raising VC funding and off to the races. So it was just a really fun job to both teach cooking and then, run the training and development aspect of the business.
And help in the midst of that growing environment, sort of that startup kind of environment, you were establishing and training, and I guess probably coaching to some degree, some of these new leaders in their roles.
Yeah, and I hired a consultant to help me, and she was doing all of these soft skills training in the Silicon Valley. Now, remember, this is a time where culture was just being talked about. Human behavior was not something that people really spent they didn't invest in it. They weren't necessarily interested in career development for their employees. They were much more interested in productivity. And so I was one of her clients, and she said, I'm double booked. Can you teach maybe 1 day a week at some of these tech companies in the Silicon Valley? And so my boss at the time, that CEO that was way before his time, said, listen, once a week, if you can go teach at some of these tech companies, do that, because you can bring this knowledge back to us.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's a huge bit of support there.
Yeah, no, it was pretty amazing. But I remember, to your point earlier, walking in, my first client was a group of system engineers. There was 200 people. We were doing the Myers-Briggs type indicator, or one of those personality models. Maybe it was temperament. I brought puppets to actually illustrate each personality type. So you were either a dolphin or an owl. And I thought that was a good idea with 200 systems engineers.
With puppets.
Yes. And so here I am with my puppets and talking about personality types. And let's just say you didn't want to be me that day. It wasn't pretty. Much like you, not only were they prisoners, then there was this woman with puppets. I took it away after about 30 seconds, realizing the nonverbals weren't good. But that was kind of launched me into doing learning and development mostly my clients are tech and biotech. So
So did you start going from 1 day a week down here helping her to two, or how did you transition away from the cooking school? Because I don't think you're still there anymore. So
yeah, no, I actually did both for a while.
Mhm.
So I think I started the transition before I knew I would completely jump into the consulting role. Uh, I think, like many people in a startup, we started putting more structure at the cooking school, and my function was going to be restructured. Learning and development was going to come up into HR and report
Yeah.
through finance, I think. And so I got a new boss, and really, like many people, you leave organizations because you don't like your boss.
Yep.
Yeah, poor management. And so, it was, I quit the cooking school, and the next day I got a call from a company I won't name, but that we all know and sometimes love. And they said, "We heard you're a free agent. Will you come teach for us as a consultant?" And so we were off to the races. I mean, I was booked until the tech wreck in 2001, booked 5 days a week for various
Wow.
Silicon Valley companies.
Some big names too, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of America's
Yep.
best known and sometimes well-loved companies. Sometimes not so much, yeah.
So, I mean, you kind of went from a situation that was a change that happened in your personal life. It caused you to, in a way, improvise and take a look at what you could possibly do. Then, as I don't know, you can call it some kind of leading signals came to you from somewhere. These opportunities were presented, and you stepped into them. Is that kind of the way your process went?
Yeah, it's interesting you say improv. I never had a plan. So, like Simon Sinek likes to say, he's allergic to structure. I am probably one of the least planned people. So I didn't have a career plan. I was kind of winging it. And one of my favorite books is actually called Improv Wisdom. It's a book by Patricia Ryan Madsen. And she says, accept all offers. Say yes, and it's the first rule of improv. So I think I was, improvising and just saying yes and feeling scared a lot of the time.
Right. So I just want to tie a little potential thread here. So, it's interesting. We talked about your banking and moving into the cooking school. And I think people often view themselves as their role rather than the innate qualities that they have. And I think that, you pretty rapidly moving into management at the bank, I think is what I sensed from your discussion there. And then moving into leading a whole new thing at the cooking school. And then I'll say being pulled forward by these other opportunities. There is something in you that was pulling you into these opportunities, right? At least that's the way I look at it. So you can be scripted and say, this is what I know of myself. This is what I believe in myself. This is what I desire to do. And then walk into it. Or I think the other thing is that people notice, people come back to you for certain things, whether there's a job title associated with it or not. And so I think that helps inform these kind of shifts.
Yeah, and I think early on, I think I knew that I was a teacher and that I wanted to teach. So it really didn't matter if I was teaching statistics or communication classes. The content wasn't necessarily what mattered. I really enjoyed teaching. And so, often, I obviously have a consulting business, but I would say I'm a teacher, and understanding what are those natural or skills that are native to me. And so whether I was in a banking environment, a cooking school environment, or a biotech environment, how could I leverage my natural skill in teaching. So I wasn't following titles, and I wasn't following a career trajectory that was traditional. I was just looking for opportunities to leverage my natural way of being. And
Okay, so let's roll forward a little bit then.
yeah.
So let's think about the next major shift that you might think of that came about. How long were you sort of in this consultant role until there was some kind of a next consideration or event?
Well, I think, I was a single mom, and I'm, running this little boutique consulting business. There's a constantly learning, and there is a limit to saying yes. And so, the dark side of saying yes to everything is you take on too much. And so I taught a class and was really exhausted, and drove home and went to bed, and the next morning got up and had a major heart attack.
Oh my goodness.
So that was kind of a wake up call. I was very, very lucky, because women and heart disease present very differently. I thought I had the flu, and luckily my daughter said, I saw something on Katie Couric around women, and,
Wow.
and called 911, and I was in surgery within 40 minutes of the event. And so I was very, very lucky to survive, and thought, well, gee, does this mean my purpose is to really make women aware of heart disease? And I thought maybe that's what this is about. But the truth was, no, I can share that experience, but it was really a wake-up call around balance and what's important. And, work, it's part of your life, but it's not everything. And so it was kind of a reset in that way, transitioning into where do I really want to spend my time? Because at this point, every day is extra. I was young to have that kind of massive.
And what happened? You were fairly young when it happened. Okay.
Yeah, no, I was fairly young when it happened, but it's not unheard of. But it definitely, you think every day's extra. Where do I want to spend this time? How do I want to spend this time?
Well, obviously at that point you needed to heal up, and I imagine you were processing through as you were just sharing, but was there some specific things you decided kind of in an intentional way you were going to change, and what were they, and how'd you go through that process?
I think the lesson was, I think my focus in teaching was always around others. And this was a lesson in, I can't teach, I can't give to my family, I can't help or support others unless I take care of myself. And so the real lesson was self-care. And so I changed my diet. Exercise was a non-negotiable. Really eating cleanly, not to lose weight, but to just take care of myself. Spending time, being compassionate with myself. And so I think that was a rebalancing act. And very intentional, because it wasn't easy. And I think it was actually very hard. And I remember one night at dinner, I was with my daughters, and they wanted to order dessert. And I said, I'll just have fruit. And my daughter, Christine, said, Mom, thanks. And I said, for what? And she said, for taking care of yourself for us.
Wow.
Because I really wanted that hot fudge sundae. I mean, but I thought, wow, I'm not going to be able to do any of the things I love to do, and support other people if I don't take care of myself. So that memory is very interesting to me, because there are little things, if you think back over your life, that pop up. This could be a phrase or even a word or a look, and you never forget them. Yeah.
It's almost like someone shining a light on that moment to have you stop and think about it. It sounds a little weird, but yeah, you can bring it forward so many years later.
Yeah, and I think that self-care lesson is so relevant today as we're sheltering in place. For your listeners, is we have to take care of ourselves in order to take care of others, and it's okay to um, to sleep when you need to sleep, and to get out and take a walk and exercise, and be sad, or process whatever those emotions are that come up. uh and it's a lot. I think we haven't really touched into the grieving phase of this, and the shift in transition can bring there's a sense of loss before the new beginning starts. And I'm not sure we have touched into that. So I think self-care is at a premium at this point.
Wow. So there's a lesson, self-care.
Yeah.
And as is often the case, sometimes we have to be sort of knocked out of our normal treadmill existence, right, in order to see these things. Yeah. You would think we would be a little more observant, but in our world today, I mean, it's so fast paced and there's so much information flowing at us, and I think we're reacting most of the time. We're just responding at sort of a surface level. But when these events happen, and when we take a pause, it's pretty profound. And I think that it makes us step back and think about how important self-care is, how important for me. One of the things as I look back over my career in life, I hit it really hard early on trying to make my way and make my mark. And I spent way too many hours trying to do that at the expense of time with my family. Now, my kids will say, it's no problem, Dad. We understood. Everything's good. But that's one thing I wish I would have done differently,
Yeah.
So more awareness, I think, would pay real big dividends. Why don't we...
Well, I wanted to piggyback on what you said, Joe, because I think it's really an important point. Is when we're young at the beginning of our career, we think there's some place to get to, right? I'm going to, that ambition, by the way, and there's nothing wrong with ambition, but I would suspect maybe there's no place to get to. It's getting to a place where you get to engage the skills that you really love doing, right? Working in a way that kind of feeds your soul, and again, balance. So I just wanted to say, certainly looking back, it would have been nice to know that earlier on.
Oh yeah, and I think that Simon Sinek has a lot to say about that, and a couple of his books kind of tie into that. And you think about the Golden Circle, right? And finding your why. He talks about corporate examples, with Apple kind of as one example. Sure. And buying products more about the why of the company than what they produce per se. And in a way, it's kind of understanding your why, not being so focused on a title or a role or all these other externals, right? The other thing I've kind of come across in my journey is, and I've talked to people I coach, is that, and you alluded to this, having this outcome, the specific outcome, it tends to be external outcome in mind. And, there's a good signal there. If you're pushing a rock up the hill and it just wearing you out to do what you think your outcome is, or what your notion of how you're going to make your mark, it's time to step back and think about that a little bit, because you might be off your golden circle target. Why,
Well, it's interesting. Somebody once said to me, and probably the best coaching advice I had ever gotten or received was, go where the energy takes you. Yeah. Why follow the energy or go with it rather than pushing that rock uphill. Whenever I've pushed the rock uphill, it's exhausting and there's no satisfaction. So, going where the energy takes you, whether that, I know that sounds a little airy-fairy, but I think it's really good advice rather than trying to get to an external target. We can't control our external circumstances necessarily. Just like today, I don't have a lot of control on what's happening in the environment, but I do have control on how I'm going to respond to it.
Yes. Very profound. Okay, so let's roll it forward some more.
Sure.
Again, just to sort of tie this together, what we're trying to do is expose these transitions, titans of transitions. I'm really trying to bring folks in the room with me, the virtual room in this case, that can share their journey and share what they learned and how they sense to make these shifts, hopefully a little bit more deftly fashion than we might at times. So let's roll it forward, and because I know you have another kind of story to tell as we were chatting offline just beforehand.
Well, I think, certainly I have always I found fairly early on, what I love doing, corporate training. I think I looked at what is my mission here, and that was kind of, people can become deadened in corporate America by pushing the rock up the hill and trying to get up, some invisible corporate ladder. And so, but I had my own type of gerbil wheel that I was on, just keep going and doing more and more and more, partly, because I loved it, and partly because we all get caught up in this fast-paced, need to be productive. So, I certainly found more balance after, the heart attack, but pretty quickly resumed old habits. So that took, several times of resetting before I got it. And then, things were seemingly going well. And my middle daughter tragically died, and that probably brought me to my knees, crashed me through the floor. And that, I have to say, was an experience, and continues to be an experience like no other. And I actually, as gregarious and I think as enthusiastic about life as I have been through, consistently, that took a toll on me. Yeah. And I think what was so incredible, if I could say anything is incredible about an experience like that, is I was so supported by friends and family. The surprising part of where the support came from were my clients. So I was working at Zoma at the time, and they said, please come back to us. You need, you're in the middle of a management series. Please come back. And I showed up to, do a class, and somebody said, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. And I think that was the beginning of my healing process. Was I still had to show up in life. And I also, went to Africa and taught in an orphanage. And that's a country that everyone has been touched by grief in Africa. So it's a conversation that people are willing to have, and to teach these little children in an orphanage was, again, a healing process.
How did you come by doing that?
A neighbor came by that I didn't know and said, she has a group called Project Grace, and they take grieving mothers and grieving parents to third world countries to do work, whether it's cleaning up garbage in Mexico, orphanages in Vietnam or Africa, like I did, or even grieving, engaging in grieving rituals in Greece, which I also did. But I have to say, again, I was teaching, was the getting back into the world and showing up. And my clients allowed me to do that and supported me through that. So I was very, very, I felt like I had to learn to let people help me, because there was no way to get through that experience alone.
And was that hard for you as a person?
Oh yeah, because I mean, if you're the teacher, they're the students, and you're in charge. I mean, there's a power dynamic here. Yes, it was so humbling to let people help you. Absolutely.
Be vulnerable enough to, first of all, let them know what was going on. And I have to say, tying back to earlier in our conversation, that's one of the things that really, I think, sets you apart from others in this field, is that you make deep connections in your classes, and you have lifelong friendships with people, that you stay in touch with over the years. They're not just clients to you. I mean, there's some people you don't connect with, obviously, but when there is something there, it goes on.
Yeah. And I think to tie that thread through is, there are people in each organization. I mean, I am humbled every time I walk in. People tell me their stories, and they're vulnerable, and they tell me, I've had CEOs go, I don't know what I'm doing. And sharing that is so important. And there are people that I take on my journey with me. So I've known people 15, 20 years. And I think, and we promote each other, and we still support each other. And I've watched clients I've coached go from being newly minted managers to chief scientific officers. And so I've gotten this really joy of watching other people's careers take off and flourish. And they've, it's not always been an ascension. I mean, they share I got fired today too. But those lifelong friendships kind of work two ways. One, to take you to the beginning, I've had some of the best scientists in the industry teach me basic science, so I can link those management theories and practices to what they do at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. So it's been a two-way street with the people in my class. And obviously they've gone on this journey with me and have been by my side. So there's at least, this was before LinkedIn. So, we still, see each other all the time.
Wow. So, if I may ask, I'm going to ask. It's clearly something like this is, I'll say, a mortal wound. And how long has it been?
It will be 7 years, August 31st. 7 years. And if you had said to me that I'd still be standing, I would have gone, there is no way. But I also, you talk about choice and resilience. And I think there's a couple of things that, we don't choose necessarily what happens in our corporate environments, in the external world. Feels like we don't have a lot of choice dealing with COVID other than how we respond to it. Wow. And I decided that I needed to model a way forward. Even the next day, I was like, I have 2 other children. I need to model a way forward. And I think that's a thread in leadership too. You model the way. And I never really knew what that was. I had taught model the way in leadership, model the way forward. But this was the test. I needed to model a way for parents that would come behind me and have to deal with circumstances like this, and model a way for my children and salvage their lives too.
Yeah. So so 2 other daughters, right? So that must have impacted your relationship. I imagine you sort of joined arms a little bit there, but I'm supported each other, at different moments because your grieving cycle might be a little different. And just curious about how that transformed those relationships.
Yeah, no, it was, really, you think of everyone comes together, but you are on different cycles. So, they're having an okay day and I'm, in the gutter crying. So, you're really bumping into each other sometimes. That said, we were a bond of, a mom and 3 daughters. We were a little foursome. Um, and there's a missing piece and it will always be that way. But, I think they, along with me, kind of made this pact of we're going to go forward together. And one is a young lawyer and doing some amazing work and amazing good work, doing a lot of, nonprofit. And then my other daughter is in HR, which, so not surprising.
Yeah.
And, certainly their careers, like so many young people these days, is not necessarily on pause, but they're certainly, the trajectory of their careers are changing as well.
Yeah. So we started out, let's kind of go talking about what you're doing today. Let's go back to that for a few minutes if we can.
Sure, of course.
So these different events, major events, and now, I mean, how has that influenced the way you approach what you're doing today? I mean, you shared earlier that although when you went through your heart attack, you made some firm convictions of changing a number of different things, obviously, and how hard it is, the tension of getting overly committed again in terms of your time and into your business. That's just one thing. But I'm just wondering how these things, as you're further down the journey than some who are listening may be, how they informed the way you respond to things today.
So I guess your question is, how have the lessons of my past informed my present?
Yes. We'll go back to the past in a little bit, sort of a time bar thing.
It's interesting. So it's not that I have the answers at all, but I certainly think knowing change is constant, and transition is something that's an iterative process. It's not like we're going through a transition, halt, new beginning. And I think I'm just more easygoing about the transition. Like, yeah, I'm really sad we're talking to each other on Zoom rather than meeting in Denver in a classroom. That said, there's a certain wisdom in knowing we've got this. We've got this. We can handle this. We can do just about anything.
Right.
As long as, we show up for it, and don't hide under the covers, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it gets back to the comment you made earlier, Julia, and that is that, the difference between sort of improvising our way through our life and trying to, map everything out like it's on a project plan, right?
Yeah.
And after you've gone through a couple T-bones in your life, you realize that it's not about following this script. You go through a zigzaggy journey, and it's more about not the what and more the be, the to be, or doobie do. Sometimes we joke about, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe that's part of what comes with being down the journey a little further is understanding that you're showing up as your authentic self with your gifts, and you're adding value that way. And the scenery may not be exactly the way you envisioned it a month ago, no less 5 years ago, but you're being who you are and who you're made to be.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we all write scripts for our lives, right? Yeah. But if you think that life is going to follow a script, you're going to be brutally disappointed. And I know I've talked about, some really, sad and massive changes in my life. That said, there's been great joys. I mean, the stuff I didn't script, some of it has been just amazing. I mean, I've gotten to fall in love with, um, you know, every one of my students. I'm humbled that they've been willing to exchange knowledge with me and share their stories. It's been, I wouldn't have had such an interesting journey if I had scripted this. I'm not that imaginative.
Oh, wow. So, okay, so let's we're going to round the corner here towards the end. And I just want to pull some things out if I can. And I'm going to ask the standard question everyone kind of rolls their eyes about. And that is, what advice would you give to your 25-year-old self? And if you can't get there, what advice would you give to someone else who's 25, maybe? Sure. Based upon sort of how you've, it's kind of climbing a mountain, right? I remember when I was in college, I've told this story before, but when I was in college, I think it was the second year of school. I was in Kentucky, and my wife and I, we were married young, and we had another couple we were friends with. We decided on a whim during break, we were going to go to Colorado, where my wife Barb and I met, and climb a mountain there. So we got in our car and we drove straight to Colorado. And then the next morning after we arrived, George and I climbed the mountain. We weren't even acclimated. We walked from about, 8,500 feet to the top of 14,197, Mount Princeton. We just walked up, weren't even acclimated. And one of the things I noticed was we kept going over these shoulders, right? And there was always a peak behind it, right? So that was an experience to learn from. That, again, it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. The journey's not like how you think it's going to happen in your mind. So if I would give advice to myself getting ready to walk up that mountain, I would have some things to say. Mm-hmm. So in similar way, thinking about what you have been through, what would you say to yourself as you were starting out?
That's really, it's such a great question, because, my 25-year-old self certainly believed in Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver. So I'm dating myself with, and you guys, those listening, you can look up those shows at night, I guess. But, there was we were going to you'd grow up and have a family and the white picket fence and a home and 2 kids. And, that I would tell my 25-year-old self to brace yourself. It's going to be better than that. To just, it's going to be so much better than you can imagine. And it's not going to be that. And I would also tell myself to, certainly, don't be afraid, be fearless. If you're not a little afraid, you want to be afraid. I mean, that's how I knew transition was in the wind. I was always a little scared, a little uncomfortable, and a little restless. So I would tell my 25-year-old self to show up, say thank you, and know that, to really trust, promote other people, to come from a mindset of abundance versus scarcity. And just to know at the end of the day, it's all going to be okay.
That is such great advice. Such great advice. Julia, thank you so much for being on Titans of Transition. I really appreciate your time today. For those listening in, I just want to say I'll put some of the things we talked about, some references that Julia brought up, in the show notes. So be sure to check there. And Julia, stay well, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.